fairly dramatic impacts. I have also seen a number of assassinations and exposed assassinations together with our sources on WikiLeaks. And this is an example which is a great bit of information, but I can't go into too much detail. So this is from East Timor, which was recently liberated. That's our newest democracy, actually, recently liberated from the Indonesian regime. And there's a famous rebel commander there who was assassinated. And we were given this telephone SMS intelligence map. So what you can see are all these people involved in the lead up to the assassination, who called whom, and what the order was. You guys should know that the NSA has these as well. So every telephone call that transitions to the United States can generate one of these. In this case, it's something that was quite good and helped us work out who was involved in that assassination.
You have to speak up.
Okay. Wow. The power of the thing. Okay, so in Kenya in December 2007, I was present, and we were involved in getting hold of a report that revealed that the President, Daniel Arap Moi, had stolen $4 billion from the Kenyan Treasury over time. And this is a country where the average person makes $1 a day. So $4 billion is a real dent in the economy. Hello. The context of that report is interesting because it shows you that regular civil society and civil government institutions are not enough once people get into power. So President Kibaki the president of Kenya at that time in 2007, got into power on an anti-corruption ticket, that he would clean out all the corruption that had happened under Moi and his cronies. He commissioned a private intelligence firm in the UK called Kroll Associates to track down where the money went. That firm produced a report and gave it to the Kibaki government. The Kibaki government then sat on the report and instead used it for political leverage. And just before the Kenyan election, Kibaki went into coalition with Moi, headed up to the election. And everyone thought, this means these guys are definitely going to win, the two major power groupings. And 3 days later, we released that intelligence report. And it was front page of The Guardian for 20 nights running on Kenyan TV. That issue, there was nothing else but that issue. And the result was a 10% swing in the vote. We know that from another intelligence report from the Kenyan intelligence. And Kibaki lost the election. As a result of losing the election, there were major constitutional reforms in Kenya. Another thing that we've received information from in Kenya is a whole lot of extrajudicial assassinations. So if you think about what the United States has been doing with its special forces, Dick Cheney's assassination squad, going out and assassinating people suspected of being members of Al-Qaeda. Well, Kenya took note of that and in fact assassinated over 1,000 people that it didn't like, with government approval, outside the court system. And I, some other Kenyan journalists and the human rights investigators at the Kenyan Human Rights Commission released an investigation, tried to release an investigation. We're not able to politically. We then released the investigation to the world, and as a result of that, the UN intervened, a special reporter was assigned, and there's been ongoing investigations. Two of the sources, the public sources to that report, two friends of mine, and this shows you something very important, that when you're public and you're in the wrong country, bad things can happen. So these two people, two human rights lawyers who were the founder of the Oscar Foundation and his colleague, were assassinated. Were assassinated in broad daylight on their way to a meeting at the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. So we've had a lot of we get sued about once per month, and we get illegal letters about once every 2 weeks. We get sued about once per month and get legal letters about once every 2 weeks. And it's interesting to see where these sources come from. They're from banking institutions, they're from the military, and sometimes media and government. But really, the banking institutions have an unusual attitude towards us. So there's a famous case last year that we dealt with. This is Bank Julius Baer. And it's a Swiss bank. We revealed their money laundering operations and asset hiding operations in the Cayman Islands. And they went after us in California, and some of you may remember this case. We lost our full registration in approximately 1 week. The legal coalition was able to defeat that.
And the attacks and reaction on us.
So this has continued with similar investment bank cases in South Africa, in just last week in the United Arab Emirates, and something you may have seen recently, which is Corpthing. So an Icelandic, the largest bank in Iceland. 2 weeks ago, we leaked its loan book, all loans over 45 million euro. And the result of leaking this loan book was, of course, an immediate attack by the Corpthing Bank on us, which we easily resisted. But it then took the most unusual step of injuncting all the media in Iceland from reporting that we had released the loan book. And inside the loan book, it reveals that the principals of Corpthing and billionaires in the UK had been, in fact, loaning themselves billions and billions of dollars without collateral. And they had been loaning people who had shares in Corpthing money based upon the shares in Corpthing. So a bit of a pyramid scheme to pump up the share price and to do favours for friends in Corpthing. As a result, there was public outrage by the censoring, in relation to the censoring of the national broadcaster in Iceland. And it's interesting to see these island cases because everyone in the community can come together. And when it's an island, you can see what is causing the effect. So this has been in all the major newspapers around the world over the past week. The Icelandic president has come out and said that they're going to change banking secrecy laws in Iceland to make it easier for people to reveal the behaviour of these investment banks. And even the UK Serious Fraud Office has called for more people to come forward, more Corpthing whistleblowers to come forward and reveal banking documents. So there's actually a world of information as far as these banks are concerned. So people say that the other two banks in Iceland, Glitnir is one and the other is absolutely unpronounceable, actually John Cleese has a segment on how to pronounce Corpthing, that's also unpronounceable. These are even worse cases. We've seen other cases in Turks and Caicos Islands and East Timor I mentioned before. And I believe that these island cases show that if we can increase the amount of whistleblowing and document leaking that's happening in major countries, we will see the same effect as we do in these island countries and smaller communities, which are totally transformed by the revelation of information, serious information. once again, this has inspired other people. So we've now received a whole lot more information about Corpthing, including SMS messages going back several months between the CEO of Corpthing and a former government minister in Iceland, which will release soon, revealing that they had fabricated documents inside Corpthing. Okay, so now that's an example of some of the material that we have successfully released and that has gone on to successfully produce reform. There's many, many other examples. In fact, thousands of other examples that we have done and that I have also been involved in. So some of you may be familiar with our censorship work and the many censorship lists that we've released from China, from Baidu, which is China's equivalent of Google, from Thailand, from Norway, from Australia, a very famous case, Denmark. We don't have time to go into that now, but on Friday at 11 p.m. We'll be doing a session just on some of these censorship cases, and we'll speak a little bit more about that later on.
Well, that's not yours. It's my section, I guess. Shall I take over? Or? Okay.
So that is an example of when it goes well, the amount of impact that can be had just by revealing information which is suppressed. The value of why go after the suppressed information, the constricted information, was because in the universe of information, it's hard to know what matters, what is actually going to produce some reform. You need a way of measuring the value, some signal, some economic signal. And the economic signal that is given to us is how hard do people try to suppress it? Because what we've seen is that they have an understanding of their own information, their internal information. And the degree of effort to which they go to suppress that information represents a signal about the potential reform effect of that information. So that is how we are able to pick the pieces of information, the pieces of knowledge that are hidden in the world, which will have the greatest reform effect for civilization. And now we will present some stuff that we don't have, and that journalists that I've spoken to want, and human rights lawyers and internet activists have nominated. We first decided to do this when a year ago a Dutch IT consultant came to me and said, well, it's great what you're doing, and it's amazing that you've had such incredible political impact, but I am a technical person. I don't understand what it is that's going to make this impact, what the zeitgeist is in the media at that moment. How can I contribute the right thing to this? I have a lot of access as an IT consultant. I'm an insider in many organizations. But how do I know what to give you? Do you have a list? And we didn't have a list. But I thought it was actually a really good idea that we did have a list. So now we have a list. Not perfect, but pretty good. And Daniel is going to tell you about this list.
Okay. So, as Julian said before, we thought it is important to understand. I mean, we're getting a lot of information about the problems that exist in our world, and we started it would be good to get a sample of what are the documents that all these organizations out there want to defend freedom of speech, to defend human rights, and all these interests that we have for the common good of the world. So we put out a call asking for the most wanted documents of these organizations in the world. So what we can see from the list we have compiled is, for one, we have found out what areas we can reach in the world. So we now know from all these countries, or from the people that have given us feedback, what countries reach our messages. If